fool would say that, unless it was going to be true. And when we examined it from all kinds of angles, we found that you cannot dismiss the story. If you want to disbelieve, that's your choice. But you cannot dismiss it. In other words, not only is there no way to dismiss it, if you really scrutinize it, there is sufficient evidence for a fair inquirer to say, yes, something happened. And what most likely happened was there was a man who was put into the tomb, and he came out of the tomb resurrected. So when you review all the 10 questions, it becomes quite clear and compelling that the claims of Jesus in the Bible are absolutely unique and could very well be the only way. So we did that till yesterday. Now we're going to do a sequel, and we said the man and the book. So is Jesus the only? Here's what Carnegie Simpson said. Jesus is not one of the group of the world's great. Talk of Alexander the Great and Charles the Great and Napoleon the Great, if you will. Jesus is a part. He is not the great. He is the only. It was Napoleon who said that if you compare Jesus to just anyone on earth, the distance is the distance of infinity. Why were they so moved to use such words about a person who was done to death as a criminal? He died as a common criminal, spat upon and beaten to death. How do you call that person so unique? So we're going to look at 7 things, probably that in his life, if we looked at, we might say, we tip our hats and say, boy, there's something going on here. Number 1, his unique entrance into history. His mother conceived him while she was yet a virgin. He had no paternal father. The virgin conception and birth of Christ is utterly unique in human history because it was predicted. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. The word is Hebrew, meaning God is with us. The virgin is pregnant. That's an unusual way of saying anything about pregnancy. Physiologically, once you're pregnant, you're no longer a virgin. But the words that are used in that book, it says the virgin is pregnant. How can that be? But that was the prediction. And despite the pregnancy, the mother is still considered to be a virgin. The fact is, when you look at that prediction, it was claimed even after Jesus was born. Yeah, that is exactly what happened. Now, we might have refuted that if we found both the mother and the father. But we know the mother because she gave birth. Nobody knew who the father was. That's why he was called illegitimate. But the very fact that you put him in that category of being an illegitimate child could possibly be that the record and the claim about him might be correct. The reason we do not have the father anywhere identified is because his father is not of this world. So the very fact that you call him illegitimate could be a pointer that you will never find his father, because his father is God. So his claim to be the Son of God is also settled or at least pointed to by this idea of a virgin birth without any father. Number 2, unique in sinless perfection. Christ's self-conscious purity is astonishing. He's the only one who could look at his bitter critics and ask them, can you find a fault in me? And the answer is silence. You look and comb through history, you will not find another human being who looked at his bitter enemies and said, can you find one fault? And the enemies are silenced. He alone carried the spotless purity of childhood, untarnished through his youth and manhood. And we saw that. And so the summary of his life, 15 million minutes of life on this earth in the midst of a wicked and corrupt generation. Every thought, every deed, every purpose, every work, privately and publicly, from the time he opened his baby eyes until he expired on the cross, were all approved of God. Never once did our Lord have to confess any sin, for he had no sin. The next person I'm going to quote is David Strauss. David Strauss in his day was a very brilliant speaker and thinker. He disbelieved the claims of Jesus. So in his life, he did more to destroy the concept of Jesus than perhaps anyone in his lifetime. He just smashed him with, the description of him was slashing brilliance. Brilliantly slash all the ideas of Jesus and God. But when he was moved and when he was challenged to really look deeply into it towards the end of his life, this is what he says about Jesus. He remains the highest model of religion within the reach of our thoughts, and no perfect piety is possible without his presence in the heart. Sinless perfection and perfect sinlessness is what we would expect of God incarnate, and this we do find in Jesus Christ. The hypothesis and the facts concur. Nobody said, thank you. Stretch out and take a deep breath. Okay, that was number 2. Now we go to miracles. Remember, we're not discussing the definition of miracles now. If we were to discuss it, it would have been in the previous sessions. We're looking at the fact of miracles. Miracles are found in almost all the religions. But here's the difference. Jesus' miracles were seen by eyewitnesses and reported and recorded in the same generation they were performed. You do not find that record of others people's miracles. Most other miracles were written hundreds of years later. So even if they wrote a miracle, hey, did it really take place? How do you establish it? You can't. This one, the person who writes, who saw it, is the one who was actually present there. I saw it. I wrote it down. The second difference is that Jesus himself performed the miracles. Now, the Quran in the Islamic tradition is considered a miracle. But Muhammad didn't perform the miracle. It was Allah who did the miracle and gave it to Muhammad. Moses, when he put his rod over the Red Sea and parted the Red Sea, he himself said, God is going to perform this miracle. In the case of Jesus, he himself performed the miracle. So it sets him apart and his miracles apart. The miracles are believed in non-Christian religions because the religion is already believed. But in the biblical religion, miracles are a part of the means of establishing the true religion. This distinction is of immense importance. It was the miracle authenticating the religion at every point. That is why the fact that we have eyewitnesses who wrote it down established this. If there were no eyewitness, we'd had a hard time. It's eyewitness, saw it, wrote it down. So there are miracles in all religions, but these miracles of Jesus are actually credible because the report is that credible. Greatest words, after reading the doctrines of Plato, Socrates, or Aristotle, we feel the specific difference between their words and Christ's is the difference between an inquiry and a revelation, between a question and a statement. He spoke words with a certain authority that everyone there understood that nobody else had that authority. How come? And now we know because we did the study. Because he came from the realm of the absolute truth. So when he was expounding certain truths, he could say it as a master of that statement. Nobody else could. Everyone has wondered whether what they're saying is true or not and put 2 and 2 together and then made the statement. He didn't have to put 2 and 2 together. He knew the end because he was the master of the whole statement he was making. Look at the words he used about his own words. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Nobody said anything. Never did the speaker seem to stand more utterly alone when he uttered this majestic utterance. Never did it seem more improbable that it should be fulfilled. But as we look across the centuries, we see how it has been realized. They have never passed away. 2,000 years, still there. What human teacher ever dared to claim an eternity for his words? Lasting influence. That ministry of Jesus lasted only 3 years. Yet in these 3 years is condensed the deepest meaning of the history of religion. No great life after its close excited such universal and lasting interest. As the centuries pass, the evidence is accumulating that, measured by his effect on history, Jesus is the most influential life ever lived on this planet. He addressed deep needs. Now, he was not doing flashy stuff. People think, oh, all his miracles were meant to, make him a hero. The people thought he was a hero because he did it, but he himself didn't do it to become a hero. In fact, the words in the writings, they're not flashy like you usually see in mythological writings. They, make these miracles and the word that a person does in the best possible way, and you use all flowery languages. Do you know what Jesus' miracles are called? Just works. That's it. The word works. What was he doing? He was trying to address the deep needs of the human beings who were in front of him. Look at the words he used. If anyone thirsts, let him come to me. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Now, just think for a moment. What is more basic than being thirsty and tired? And this man, with all the powers in his hand, would still address those simple things that all of us are troubled with. I'm thirsty. Here's drink. I'm tired. I will give you rest. That is what he was wholly after. That was the focus of his mission. To give the thirsty something to drink, to give to the tired some degree of rest. He addressed the naked heart of man and touched the quick of the conscience. That was his message. That was number 6. So number 7 is the final one. He did conquer death, and we saw that. When he said that he himself would rise from the dead, he said something that only a fool would dare say. No founder of any religion known to men ever dared to say a thing like that. We may safely assume that there never was before or since such a proposal made. When asked for a sign, he pointed to this sign, resurrection from the dead, as his simple and sufficient credential. He who was ready to stake everything on his ability to come back from the tomb stands before us as the most original of all teachers. So Jesus, unique? Probably. Unique entrance into history. Unique in sinless perfection. He himself performed the miracles. He spoke the greatest words ever spoken. And his influence has lasted for the greatest amount of time. And his intent was to address our needs. And finally, he went and conquered that which is the most fearful thing in the human mind, death itself. Therefore, we have to agree with this anonymous statement about Jesus. 19 centuries have come and gone, and today he is the centerpiece of the human race and the leader of the column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, all the navies ever built, all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as that one solitary life. Take a break. Stretch out. Are you thinking? Let the wheels turn. Because once we address ourselves, we should satisfy ourselves that there's a good reason why we follow anybody. I will again quote Benjamin Warfield of Princeton University, the late Benjamin Warfield. He said, we do not follow despite reason. We follow because it is the only reasonable thing to do. And this is my whole ministry. This is my whole passion. That if we really know what we believe, it will guide us, make our lives very, very stable on this earth. And I've seen this time and again. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do when I go out and speak to people. So I hope your wheels are spinning. Stretched out and had a breath? Okay, let's get to the next one. The book. Once again, 7 points. Amazingly written. Different generations, different diverse authors, different place and circumstances, different times and moods, different literary styles, different continents and different languages. Let's go through each of those. Different generations. The first author was Moses, about 1400 BC. The last author was John, about 100 AD. A period of 1400 years. Those definitely acknowledge that it was written in different generations. Diverse authors, about 40 authors in differing backgrounds. For example, Moses was educated judge and leader. Joshua was a military general. David was a shepherd, poet, musician, king. Daniel was a prime minister. Amos a herdsman. Luke a physician and historian. Matthew was a tax collector. Peter was a fisherman. Paul was a Jewish rabbi. And Mark was a personal attendant. Examples of different circumstances. Moses wrote while he was traveling as the head of some bunch of nomads who were trying to look for the promised land. Jeremiah wrote when he was punished in a dungeon. Daniel wrote while he was peaceful at home in a palace. Paul wrote when he was in various towns, both free and imprisoned. David wrote when he was a fugitive in a wild country as well as he was crowned king. Luke won his extensive trials and John in lonely exile. Look at the spectrum from which they wrote. Different times and moods. Moses as an undisputed leader. David as an outlaw as well as a king. Solomon in prosperity when he was giddy up there, the top guy in the world. As well as at the end of his life, he was so dejected, he didn't know what was happening to him. Daniel, when he was peaceful as well as perplexed. Sometimes when Daniel wrote, he did not know what he himself had written. Jeremiah in deep grief and bitterness. Isaiah in solid conviction and hope. Luke in exactness and detail. Paul in sternness as well as tenderness like a father. Different literary styles. Storytelling, historical, poetry and song, romance, didactic, personal letters, biography, autobiography, code of law, prophetic, parables, symbols. How many different literary styles in one book? Different continents. It was written in 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Different languages. The Old Testament was mainly Hebrew with some Aramaic, and the New Testament mainly Greek with some Aramaic. So, different generations, authors, places, times, moods, literary styles, continents, languages. What's the one word that is going through all of the words there? Descriptions. Different. And yet, it has an amazing harmony. Single source of information. Single story and theme. Single hero. All of them writing one story? All of them one topic? All of them one narrative? Same hero from beginning to end? Would a random selection, even 10 authors, living at different times over 100 years, write on the same subject, have the same theme and the same hero? No work of fiction can maintain a single story and theme for 1400 years unless it was supervised from beginning to end. Amazing influence. Since the dawn of civilization, no book has inspired as much creative endeavor among writers. No other book in all human history has in turn inspired the writing of so many books as the Bible. Civilization has been influenced more by the Judeo-Christian scriptures than by any other book or series of books in the world. Amazing preservation. Jews preserved it as no other manuscript has ever been preserved. They kept tabs on every letter, every syllable, word, and paragraph. Whoever counted the letters and syllables and words of Plato and Aristotle, Cicero, or Seneca? They kept the standard high because they had professional copiers whose only job was to copy. That was their whole job. So the standard they set was very high. You should have the exact number of words in what you have written as the original. You should have the middle word coinciding with the middle word of what you wrote. You should have the number of letters exactly the same. If there's a mistake, you can't change it. You knock your whole thing off and start again. That was the standard that they used. Today we say, oh, we made a mistake, rub it off and put it. No. It's the middle letter and the middle word is not the middle word of yours, then yours is disqualified completely. Out it goes. Some of those have been wrapped and we found some of those. Everything is okay except for 1 or 2 places and no longer in use. For 2,300, 3,900 years, the text of proper names has been transmitted with the most minute accuracy, a phenomenon unequaled in the history of literature. It may be safely said that no other work of antiquity has been so accurately transmitted. Stretch out and take a deep breath and think. We've done 4 points. Number 5, amazing survival. It's the only book to be repeatedly banished and attempted to be destroyed completely. No other book has been so chopped, knifed, sifted, scrutinized, and vilified, and been subject to such a mass